just so that if anybody wants to look at it afterwards, we can do that. So I am going to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Kind of
I'm
little.
not going to do the, sorry?
It's kind of little. Can you?
It's little. I knew you were going to ask me to do that. The problem is I lose everybody on my screen
Oh,
when I do that. So that's okay. Okay. So is that better?
Yes,
Okay. So you're seeing just that. What does it mean to be a board member slide?
I'm seeing you and that, so we're good.
Okay. Terrific. Okay. So I'm going to try and keep the lookout for people in the waiting room. So just to kick this off, I will, you all know me, everybody who's on the screen, but I work as a nonprofit consultant and I've worked with a lot of, mostly smaller nonprofits. And, really there's such a need out there for board members. And so this was a great topic from that perspective. But where this also came from was feedback from our members that members want to be more engaged in the nonprofit community. They're wanting more than just writing a check for membership. They want to learn more about what nonprofits in Hunterdon are doing and what nonprofits, what nonprofits are there in Hunterdon, and looking for ways to get engaged and involved. And so Bonnie and I decided to start really big with board and nonprofit leadership. So we really just, through this presentation, we just want to encourage everyone to consider this, to consider leadership, board leadership. And if there are any nonprofits on this call today or that watch this video afterwards, we would love to know that you're looking for people because we're not necessarily a formal matchmaking service, but we do really want to encourage our members to get more involved, and we want to know from the nonprofit community how we can help that community. And then anyone, on this call, we will have time for questions at the end, but if you're a member and you want to learn about something specific, please do let us know. So what we're going to talk about today is, then this came right out of the flyer that we sent out, discovering what it means to be a board member of a nonprofit organization, roles and responsibility, how it is actually a great opportunity. Why, yes, you can do it. I talk to a lot of my peers, a lot of my friends, and there's a real fear about it or that they're not qualified. Yes, you are. And then talking a little bit about where Hunterdon needs you. So with that, as we kind of get into the meat of the presentation, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague and partner on all things Impact 100 grants, Bonnie Duncan. So Bonnie, you ready to roll?
yep. Thank you.
Okay.
So these are basically some of the areas that we're going to cover. And again, for those who know me, I really do tend to get into the weeds of governance, especially around nonprofits. Judy, I know I've known you for a very long time. Denise, you're kind of new to me. I have 25 years of nonprofit experience as the CEO for the United Way of Hunterdon County, and also recently started doing consulting for nonprofits, particularly in board development and capacity building and interim leadership, or working with organizations that are in transition. So that's a little bit of my background. So these are sort of the broad areas that I'll cover, just to get everybody grounded on what it is to be a board member. You want to flip that one for me? Thank you. So when we talk about one of the big differences between being a volunteer and being on a board, which is also a volunteer job, is that there are fiduciary duties that a board member has that you don't have as a volunteer. And this fiduciary responsibility is defined by case law. The duties of the board members are legal standards against which all actions taken or not taken are measured. So it requires board members to be objective, unselfish, reasonable, honest, trustworthy, efficient. And as stewards of the organization, board members must always act in for its good and betterment, exercise reasonable care and decision-making, and not place an organization under unnecessary risk. Next. So the first duty, which is the duty of care. Again, I've listed sort of what that requires, and when we say, I call this is the one that says you must pay attention. So that means that you must attend meetings of the board and any appropriate committees, be prepared in advance for the meetings, obtain information before voting to make appropriate decisions, use your own independent judgment. Don't just be a rubber stamper. Periodically examine the credentials and performance of those who serve on the organization, and then frequently review the organization's finances and financial policies, along with complying with filing requirements of periodic informational returns. So that's what you need to do to pay attention. The next duty, the duty of loyalty, requires you to disclose any conflicts of interest. Otherwise, adhere to the organization's conflict of interest policy. You need to avoid the use of corporate opportunities for your personal gain or any other benefit. And you need to not disclose confidential information concerning the organization. And I would just put a special note to say that conflicts of interest are not inherently illegal. They can be common to both nonprofit and for-profit. The important factor here is the process by which a board manages the conflicts. So every organization should have a policy that also includes the process for how you will manage any conflicts of interest that get disclosed. And just sort of remember that sometimes even the appearance of a conflict of interest needs to be managed carefully because it could impact the reputation of yourself as a board member and of the organization. The duty of obedience, following all the rules, because there's so many rules for nonprofits. So you want to make sure that the organization is compliant with any applicable regulatory requirements. You want to make sure that they comply and that you periodically review all documents that govern the operation of the organization. You want to make decisions in advance of the organization's mission and within the scope of what the organization is, and what's in alignment with your governing documents. So how do board members remain guardians of an organization's mission? The easiest one is to establish a strategic direction. So think about what the organization is set up to achieve and why, and then planning is your key element. You want to ensure that you have enough resources for the organization to deliver on its mission. And this includes the people needed, the staff, as well as the financial resources. And then lastly, you want to provide oversight on the finances to make sure that you've got total transparency, risk management, oversight on legal and ethical matters, oversight on the CEO's performance, and monitoring programs, but not managing them. That's a key.
I'm nodding my head.
Next that I have are sort of like the top 10 roles and responsibilities of a board member. The first one is to determine the organization's mission and purpose. So a statement of mission and purpose should articulate the organization's goals, their means, and the primary constituents that they serve. It's the board's responsibility to create the mission statement and review it periodically for accuracy and validity. And each individual board member should fully understand and support it. The worst thing is to have a mission say, I'm going to say one of those disease organizations, and somehow you cure that disease. You haven't adjusted your mission, but now you're doing something else. So you just need to make sure they're in alignment. Number 2, boards must reach consensus on the chief executive's job description and undertake a careful search to find the most qualified individual for the position. Little side note here, there's been an awful lot more of transition within CEOs and nonprofits. So as a board member, know that that could be something that you may need to address during your tenure as a board member. I always say, if somebody tells you all you have to do is go to a meeting once a month, there may be other things that will pop up, and this is a trend that we're seeing. You want to support the CEO and review his or her performance. You want to make sure that they have the moral and professional support that they need to further the goals of the organization. And the chief executive, in partnership with the entire board, should decide on a periodic evaluation of his or her performance. People don't always feel comfortable doing it. And it's something that really is a benefit so that the CEO can continue to progress, and they don't know if they're doing the right thing or going in the right strategic direction if you're not giving them the feedback. Number 4, effective organizational planning, and you want to make sure that you actively participate with the staff in an overall planning process and assist in implementing the plan's goals. Strategic planning used to be plans out 5 and 10 years. If you can get one to go out 3 years, that's probably a stretch, just because there's so much change in today's environment. You do want to look beyond, an annual operating plan, but I would say 1 to 3 years is probably more realistic. Ensuring that there's adequate resources, and this is one of your foremost responsibilities, is making sure that there's enough resources. The board should work in partnership with the chief executive and the development staff, if you have it, to raise the funds for the community. Managing those resources effectively, you need to, the whole board needs to remain accountable to the donors and to the public, and safeguard the tax exempt status that it holds. And so you must assist in the annual budget and ensure that the proper financial controls are in place. 7, you want to determine, monitor, and strengthen the organization's programs. And the board's role in this area is to determine which programs are the most consistent with its mission, and then to monitor its effectiveness. You want to enhance the organization's public standing. The organization's primary link to the community, including constituents, the public, and the media, is the board. So clearly articulating the organization's mission, its accomplishments and goals to the public, as well as generating support from important members of the community, are important elements of a comprehensive public relations strategy. So that being an ambassador for that agency is from the get-go, from your 30-second elevator speech to being able to expand beyond that when asked. You want to ensure the legal and ethical integrity of the organization and maintain its accountability. You're ultimately responsible for making sure that you're adhering to all the legal standards and ethical norms. Solid personnel policies, grievance procedures, clear delegation to the chief executive on hiring and managing employees will ensure proper decorum in this area. And you, as a board, you must establish pertinent policies and adhere to the provisions of the organization's bylaws and articles of incorporation. And lastly, you want to recruit and orient new board members and assess board performance. All board members have a responsibility to articulate and make known their needs in terms of members' experience, skills, and many other considerations that define a balanced board composition. They must also orient new members to their responsibilities and the organization's history, needs, and challenges. This is an area that's rarely done, but important. But evaluating the performance and fulfilling these responsibilities, a board can recognize its achievements and reach consensus on which areas need to be improved. So a little more about that is the board building. As we said, we know that a lot of nonprofits are looking for board members. So what are they looking for when they're trying to establish that? When we look at size and composition of a board, there is no magic number. each organization is going to find what works best for them, for the work that they want to do. Nearly every organization will talk about diversity. Basically, the board typically reflects the community that it serves in. And so you want to make sure that your organization has individuals that may be very different, maybe depending on the influence or the presence of characteristics with which they're born, such as gender, ethnicity, race, age, and those aren't easily changeable, or those characteristics that can be developed and even change, such as our education, social class, functional responsibilities, religion, and values, as well as leadership skills, community involvement, public recognition, political connections, and fundraising capability. So when we look at diversity, you look at it really from both of those areas. Term limits, Colleen and I share a very strong opinion about term limits. And again, while there's no magic formula that determines how long a board member should remain on a board, best practices include establishing term limits. Many organizations have established a system that sets staggered terms, ensuring some leadership continuity while developing some succession planning. And I will say that when we say term limits, I mean your overall board service, not necessarily moving from one position within a board to another. And there typically are term limits within the term limits for that. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the evaluation of the board and of individual board members. So some of the things you do as an individual and some you do as a whole. And so making sure that you're assessing that performance. Sometimes it's a self-reflection about what you're doing well, and you're like, I thought I was really like participating more than I was. I'm going to make a better effort next year. So sometimes it's a way of sort of having the wake-up call of how to do better as you move along. So always encouraging individual self-assessment, but then as a board, what have you agreed to do? And how are you doing in that space? So now that I've given you all these rules, which is what I'm known for, I'm going to give the nicer, funner stuff back to Colleen. So Colleen, take it away.
Thank you. And what Bonnie gave you is really, really comprehensive. And what we want to do is really inspire, because that really is the intent here. And where, a lot of what she covered can seem really overwhelming. Please know that our objective today and our objective with anyone who's interested at all in board service is that we want everyone to feel confident, prepared, and interested in considering board service if you aren't already. Because even though she gave you a ton of information, it's better to have that information than have no information and feel even more overwhelmed, right? So, I really feel strongly that not only are we all needed for board service, but it can actually provide some pretty incredible rewards. Networking and personal connections, personal and professional connections. I have made so many new friends personally and professionally through my board service. And I really thought I knew a lot of people, and it turns out I don't. And so I've had some really great opportunities to connect with people and even help other people in my life through the people that I've met on board service. There's the obvious, giving back, the volunteerism. There's a great opportunity to learn more, get more of an awareness of community needs, issues, and triumphs in the community, because so many of these nonprofits are running so lean. They have, one-armed paper hangers as executive directors, and they often don't have the time or the bandwidth to really celebrate the stuff that they do, and they do some amazing stuff. So being on the board really gives you the opportunity to kind of have a lens on that. Certainly great opportunities for leadership. I have learned a lot of new skills through my board service. I am okay with finance and budget, but I now serve on the finance committee of a board, and I have learned even more about that. So education is another thing. And listen, ladies, as we age, it's good to learn new things. Am I right? So
Except technology.
except technology. I've learned some technology too. So, I think about, again, I speak a lot to my peers and my friends, and I get a lot of reaction of like, well, I can't serve on a board. I don't have the skill set. I don't have that kind of background or experience. I always think, remember the movie The Help, and Aibileen, when she said you was kind, you was smart, you was important. I kind of think this is the same thing, but my version is you are qualified, you are capable, and you are needed. So don't be overwhelmed or intimidated. What do nonprofits need? They really need, again, they run very lean. And so the one thing about board service that I want to mention that is really weird about the nonprofit sector is that it's this unique situation where a professional is being managed by volunteers. And so that creates, sometimes that can create problems, but if you have boundaries and you do all the things that Bonnie suggested, you generally have a very healthy relationship. But really, that organization needs board members who can help run the organization. They need experience, they need enthusiasm and passion. Bonnie touched on this diversity of background, viewpoints, experience. I think that is very important. And I love to see boards that have that. Diversity of political views is very important. Respect for the leadership and staff and an understanding of the role that they play, versus the role that the board plays. Strategic thinkers, people who can take things to the 30,000-foot level a little bit and say, well, I understand that you've been doing this for a really long time, but why? Creativity, and above all, humility and curiosity. And I will also mention that I think that, if you look at this and you say, I just don't know if I'm prepared for this, I don't know, I have so many questions. Questions are appreciated. There's nothing that annoys me more at a board meeting than people who contribute nothing but second and so moved, right? So I think, and as somebody who was on a nonprofit staff and was managed by volunteers, I appreciated the questions because sometimes somebody would catch me going down a lane or a certain direction. I think, oh gosh, I didn't even think about that. So, speaking of questions, some of the questions that we encourage anyone to ask if you are being asked to serve on a board, or even if you're on a board and you feel like you need more information. These are questions that could be good to help you gauge what you're getting into, what's being asked of you. Because we all know that we all don't want to just be a board member, but we want to be a good board member. So, you can ask about the financials, and no, you do not have to be an expert on nonprofit financials or fund accounting or any of that. You just have to have a basic understanding. And if we all manage a household budget, we can understand financials enough to fulfill your fiduciary responsibility. But if you don't feel confident about it, then sit down with the bookkeeper, the financial manager, the executive director, and ask for help. They will appreciate that. I promise you. They should. What is the process for onboarding? Sometimes Bonnie and I will tell you, we'd love to see a board that has a really good onboarding process and it's, formalized. It's not always going to be formalized, but you should have some feel for where do we go from here? Any give get requirements, and that is financial. I have strong opinions about this. Some nonprofit boards will tell you a number, and if you're comfortable with that and you want to serve on that board, that's perfectly fine, because they're building that into their budget and that is part of their financial goal. I feel strongly that that give get requirement should be something along the lines of, and you'll see language similar to this: make us a priority in your charitable giving, make us one of your top 3 gifts in your charitable giving. If you are serving on a board, you probably feel passionate enough about that organization that you would be willing to give them a nice size gift. But you should know that up front. You should also know that although this is going away, and I would like to see it go away, there are grant applications that will ask what percentage of your board gives to your organization. There is only one right answer to that, right? 100%. They don't necessarily, they shouldn't be asking, you know, how much each individual board member gives. That's none of their business. They might ask as a percentage of your total revenue, what does your board give? So those are some of the reasons that board giving is very, very important. There are documents that you can ask for. An affirmation of service might be called different things with different organizations. Bonnie, what is ours called for Impact 100?
Affirmation of service.
Affirmation of service. Okay. But it basically lays out, you know, a bunch of bullet points typically and says, you know, as a board member, you are agreeing to, you know, certain things. You know, we ask every board member to serve on a committee. We ask that you make 75% of board meetings, that you adhere to confidentiality. You know, those are the kinds of things that you would see on that document. Conflict of interest forms, love to see those. As Bonnie mentioned, it doesn't mean you're out if you have a conflict. It's just something to be aware of, and it might affect, you know, what committee you serve on or something like that. Other document, there was another document that occurred to me.
A
Oh,
disclosure.
bylaws. Yeah.
Bylaws.
See the document. I'm sorry, what did you say, Bonnie?
I was saying disclosures, but that's part of the conflict of
That's
interest.
for the conflict. I was thinking, and you know, the organization's bylaws, the bylaws are what you have to do. Whatever is in your bylaws, you have to adhere to. So those are good documents that you can see. And you don't necessarily have to see all this before you agree to board service, but these are things that should be easy for an organization to produce. Also, I do want to make a quick mention because I do think that a lot of what we talk about in terms of obligations of a board member can maybe cause some concern. Organizations should also have directors and officers insurance. So just know that that is a level of protection for board members. And you are certainly free to ask about that. Any requirements for meeting attendance, committees and requirements to serve. Some organizations require all board members to serve on committees. I frankly kind of like that because it should level out the amount of work. Term limits, as we discussed, common term limits are, you know, let's say a 3-year term that can be renewed once. The reason we love term limits is because although, you know, it's hard because it's always, you always want to maintain institutional knowledge. It keeps one person from being there so long that nobody wants to take the job anymore. So, you also want, you know, fresh ideas and, you know, that kind of thing. So the other question is, how much time will this take? That's a really difficult, answer. However, if someone says not much, don't
They're
join that
lying.
board. Yeah.
Sorry.
You know, like we want more than you just have a pulse. And so, you know, we can welcome you to the board. But you could get a good answer to that in terms of, well, we ask you to attend this many meetings. We ask you to serve on a committee. We ask you to, you know, join us for fundraising events. Just ask what you're being asked to do as a board member. And then are there any try it before you buy it opportunities? And what I mean by this is, if you are asked to be on a board and you just say, you know what, I don't know if I can commit to that yet. You could ask about a higher level volunteer position. You could ask about a committee position or a special task or a short-term project, you know, something like that. If it's an organization that you don't know a lot about, that might be a way to kind of, you know, get some comfort level. But again, if you're on a board, or in my case, 4, these are questions that, you know, could your organization answer these quickly, confidently, and accurately? So, hopefully that is just a level of preparation for everyone. So
I just wanted to add that when we think of the committee structure, I think that just like trying it before you buy it, there's like what I would call an on-ramping and an off-ramping. So you could be on a committee or doing something to get to that space where you're then on a committee, and on a board. And when your term limits come to fruition, when you've, you know, completed your term, you can step down and go back on committee and continue to serve. So there are ways that you can serve on your way up and on your way down so that that institutional knowledge isn't forgotten. You're just no longer making those decisions at a board level, but you're still staying very much engaged, especially if it's an organization that's near and dear to your heart. So there is a way of staying connected without necessarily being on a board forever, which allows new blood to come in with new ideas or different ideas.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, a lot will have advisory boards, and it's a great way for the organization to build a bench for board service and also have that spot for people who are still, you know, want to lose an active and engaged volunteer, but you want to honor term limits. So that's a great point. So in terms of where you might be needed, you know, Bonnie is working on some longer, more extensive board trainings. And so, you know, stay tuned for that. Connections with organizations like the Chamber of Commerce or the United Way, they are great sort of like ear to the ground organizations that, you know, nonprofits might come to them and, you know, say, hey, we're looking for board members. You know, always free to contact Impact 100, you know, Hunterdon. We although we're not formal matchmakers, we would love to make a match. So we have told our nonprofits that if they have openings, that feel free to share those with us, and we'll share those with our membership. And just know also that if you know you can be interested, and you can have a lot of nonprofit leadership should be kind of interviewing board members. And so if they're talking to you and you're interested, you can say no. If it's for all the right reasons, then you can say no. And so I just don't want anybody thinking like, oh, somebody approached me about board service, I have to run away. You can have those conversations and say no. I have done that. I've said no, and then a year later I've said yes, because it just felt like a better time. So I am going to hopefully stop my screen share and just ask if I saw that something was in the chat, but I couldn't juggle both. Oh, Denise, yes. Vice President of the Board of New Hope Art Center in Bucks County. Thank you for your service.
Going to
We
be
need
the
volunteers.
president
You're going to be president?
July 1st.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
And Denise, I think you have 25 years of nonprofit and board experience with another organization?
32.
Okay. So tell
Fox
us.
Face Cancer Center. And I did serve the president. We had 30, we had approximately 30 people on our board, but only 9 officers. And I eventually worked my way up to president. And it was good while it lasted, but when I got off good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
But
we
that's
have
a sign of an engaged person. Like
Yeah.
if you feel like you've worked it, that's an engaged person. If you just sort of were taking up a chair, then you know, you didn't even
I
feel it when
raised
you
$5
dropped off.
million for them in 31 years.
Excellent.
Definitely wasn't taking a chair.
Mhm.
So
But
what did we miss in our presentation? What do you think we missed?
no, I took notes. I honestly like the idea of directors and officers insurance
Oh,
because
yeah.
while I was president of my chapter, one of the board members wrote me a horrific email, basically wishing me dead and wishing my parents dead. And I had to reach out to Fox Chase Cancer Center and see if they had insurance on me because I wanted, not that I wanted to sue the guy, but you know what I mean? I just needed him to shut up because he was really horrific. And that was a whole experience that I never want to have again. But I also was working on my bylaws with my chapter, but they decided to skirt me on that whole thing. So, but I think that that's really important. And I honestly loved when I was on the board at the Bucks County Audubon Society, I used to hand potential board members a folder, and it had all of that stuff on the left side and all of the signatures on the right side and my business card. And I usually got nice board members that way. So like now I just became, I just got on the board of New Hope Arts in like August or September. And then in January, I was asked to be the vice president. So I'm new. And I'm not obviously going to stay there for very long because I'll become the president on July 1st. But we desperately need volunteers to gallery sit. So if you ever come across people that love the arts and want to get involved in the arts,
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can certainly, and I know that Lawrence always says that if we have anything like that, to let him know and he'll get the word out. So we can certainly share that.
yeah, that
Yeah, I
would
mean,
be
that's
great.
something that we could put in a newsletter, just,
Mhm.
a little blurb saying volunteers needed. I know it's not Hunterdon County, but I don't think that matters. People are looking for
You're in your
volunteers.
sister city,
Yeah.
you know.
Judy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've sat on a few different boards, and when you were talking, when Denise was talking about pursuing, I'm always curious about liability because you're volunteering. You're sitting on a board, you're volunteering, someone comes and sits on, one of the meetings and they say stuff like, well, I'm going to sue all of you or whatever. And you just sit there and go like, for what? And I'm always curious about liability and how you know whether, and you might see a piece of paper that says that they have insurance, kind of like being a real estate agent. I can, my clients might say, oh, the painter has insurance, but do they? You know what I
Right,
mean?
just
So I'm
show
always,
me. Yeah.
yes. So I guess I'm keenly aware because of what I do for a living and seeing things happen that fall through, even though you've done everything in your power to assure certain things. So I'm always curious of what is your liability on sitting on a
So
board?
I think part of it is you have your own level of risk management in terms of what you're willing to personally risk. Most organizations, like I say, the directors and officers will be for very specific volunteers within an organization. Other organizations that work with a very large volunteer base may also keep volunteer insurance, which is different because it doesn't usually have that same level of fiduciary responsibility. And then certain organizations may require certain levels of liability insurance, particularly if there's any children involved in the organization or whatever. So asking those questions about exactly what they have is good. On a personal level, I know that when I started off with all of this, I personally just added an umbrella policy to my own home insurance so that if I was ever sued as an individual, I had a little more protection. That was an individual choice that I made.
Okay.
Most people don't think about doing it, but the delta difference on an umbrella policy is not very big. And if that sort of eases some of your angst around the risk management, I just put that out there as something that
Well,
I did.
probably what you don't know about me is I'm probably the most highly insured human being you're ever going to meet. Between
You're spot
disability and
on.
life and accident, because, especially when you're working, you own your own businesses now. And it's like, if something happens to you, I'll never, it was like Christmas time in my old neighborhood, and very respected doctor was up on a 30-foot, ladder putting up a wreath. And the wife was like, yes, my life insurance is paid up, but disability, it never dawned on me about disability. And it was one of those, your greater chance of something happening to you that wouldn't take your life or whatever. So I have all these insurance, but I tend to get, because it shocks me, some of the things that I hear as a board member or just being part of an organization from a volunteer, and the disrespect that I hear in different organizations. And I think to myself, do I want to still be involved? Do I want, I mean,
Mm.
I'm 71. I've been doing volunteer work since I was probably 20. So,
The
but it's
culture,
just,
the
I
culture
think
of
as I get
the
older,
board
I'm
matters.
more aware. I'm sorry, Bonnie.
I say the culture of the board matters, and that level of being inquisitive and being respected for your opinion, your and your point of view, all of, and if you're not feeling that love, that may be an indication that may not be the board you want to sit on. But
Yeah, and
All right, I'm not saying,
I
I'm
was
sorry.
thinking,
I'm
I
not
was thinking
saying the
along those,
board disrespects. I'm saying I see, let's say there's chapters or there's different things that are happening. Um, and it's not towards me. I'll see it towards somebody else. And I just go, this person's volunteering. They're not getting paid. And the way you're
Yeah.
speaking to them. And I said to somebody, I was born to be a vice principal. You know how the principal's the figurehead and the vice principal's the disciplinary. Like, I want to be able to speak my mind, but I think the older I get, the more aware I am of things. And it just kind of surprises me. Plus, the difference between a religious organization and a nonprofit that's health and another one that's, you know, different organizations for different things and the different caliber of people that are volunteering, you know, and it just kind of surprises me. And that's why I keep thinking, oh, maybe I better step down or, you know, maybe, you know, this and that. And that's why I kind of wanted to go. And it's because I obviously highly respect them.
my favorite tagline is bless and release. Just
right.
be thankful for the service that somebody provided or that you've provided, and just release and say, time to move on. So you do
Same
that with
philosophy
grace
of,
and humility. Yeah.
same philosophy of, hire slow, fire fast applies to boards. And, I would, back to the liability question, there's no guarantee. I cannot sit here and say, oh, you should all serve on a board. Don't worry about it, right? We live in a litigious society. I'm not that dumb. But I do think the better the board, the more you're protecting yourself. And so if, you cannot get involved in case management issues, right? As an example. But if you ask about policy issues regarding children and how many people and all that, that is appropriate and important for the board to get involved with. So, raising flags and asking questions and getting information, you're doing it for the good of the order, I hope.
Right.
And so the more that we're doing that, the more we're protecting the board. I mean, I serve on a board of a school for children with autism. I mean, there's going to be things that come up that somebody, you didn't provide this service the way I think you should have, and they're going to threaten to sue. But that board, that organization is so tight with their documentation and their policies, their procedures, the way they handle things, that, I feel a lot more protected. It's the boards that take their eye off the ball. And this is part of the reason that I have a bugaboo about requiring a certain amount in terms of a donation, because I don't want to, I don't know how to say this any other way. My concern is, like, why do they want you on the board? Do they want you for your checkbook? Or do they want you because you have professional experience, personal experience, diversity of thought, creativity, humility? Like, if you tie all that in and you still have a requirement for giving, I can get my head around that. But where my concern is, and where I have seen boards go, and organizations go sideways, is when it's all about how much we can get from these people. We want them to buy tables at the gala, but we're not going to hold them to their fiduciary responsibility.
Oh, see, that's bad.
So what do you think? Did I summarize that appropriately,
Yes.
Bonnie?
I mean,
Yeah.
I had one that I was only on for a year because I was a square peg in a round hole. And I go, what does that mean? Well, when they asked for stuff and people would just give checks for thousands of dollars, I thought what I was giving was to my level. And I got, okay,
Yeah.
clearly I don't fit in.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll find, find my excellence somewhere else.
Right.
But
Love that.
but I thought to myself, it was very fascinating because I'm also served for like 15 years on the synagogue board. And I remember saying to them, there is extremes. You've got the one who has all the money in the world but no time, and you've got the person who has all the time in the world and no money. And you need all of them.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I served on a board where we had corporate people and we had a farmer. And, that farmer gave so much in terms of other ways of raising money and raising awareness that she was valued the same as somebody. And that I love that, I
Right.
mean, I think the language of give to the best of your ability, make this a priority in your charitable giving, make this one of your top 3 gifts, every year. I think that's fair because like you said, Judy, someone's 5,000 is someone's 500 is someone else's 50.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so we need to, as long as everyone is contributing in other ways, and it's also give get. Like, if you can't give that much, can you help make connections to the
Well, to
organization?
what Denise said, I might bring you $2 million, or $100,000 in donations, but I remember someone coming up to me and saying, Judy, you didn't like buy an ad or something. And I went, wait, but I just referred you to my entire network.
Right.
Do you
Right.
want, and remember, I'm older. So I go, do you want my Rolodex? Do you want me? Or do you want, availability on my Rolodex? And they just looked at me like they didn't get it. And I
Mhm.
thought,
Yeah.
I might not be able to write you a check for $15,000, but I might be able to find you sponsors to give you that money.
Right.
And
And
that's
this
where
really
I
goes,
find people short-sighted.
yeah, this goes all back to everything that we talked about in this presentation is like a lot of the reason that Bonnie gave you all of that stuff and the reason that I get the questions to ask is what are the expectations? Before I agree to board service, what are you expecting of me? And then I can say, yes, I can do that. Or no, I can't write a check that big, so I'm not your guy. So
And
it all is
I will
about,
say that a lot of the agencies also may also either require or want clients as some of their board members, which can add incredible value in the planning of the work that's being done by the agency. But again, Judy, to your point, very few of them have the financial means to support it financially in any, um, substantial
Right.
way. So it's really coming together, and that's why policies and procedures matter.
yeah.
Because then there's no misunderstanding, there's no hard feelings, everybody knows what the rules are.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's,
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's like, let's just lay down expectations so that nobody feels ambushed. I mean, that's why I like the affirmation of service. We had a situation at an organization where a board member, so a staff member had said no to a client and the board member said yes to the client. And that is such a huge no-no. That's you cannot reverse, leaderships. But here's the thing, we didn't have an affirmation of service in place. And so guess what? I was like, okay, and now we're going to do this. And in that affirmation of service, it clearly states that, any client contact needs to be, vetted through leadership or whatever it was. Confidentiality is a big one. And some organizations will have social media policies, depending on the organization. And, they might say as a board member, you're representing this organization. And so we don't want this. So, rather than somebody coming to you afterwards and going, Judy, I saw that social media post that you put on and, like you're representing the organization and you were scantily clad. So,
So I will share a quick story when United Way came out with the Live United sort of tagline on social media during spring break. There were a bunch of kids that did wet t-shirt contests in the Live United shirts, and that's what spurred the
oh,
social media policies for most United Ways. Is that
did not see that coming.
no, but like, who would have thought, we thought, here's something great, let's like all post this, but there's limits, there's
Right.
limits.
I mean, being in the public, and this has nothing to do with my nonprofits, being what I do for a living, you're not going to see anything controversial on my people say, don't you have any opinions? And I go, oh, I have a lot of opinions, but they're not going to be on social media, because, you've got clients that I have very diverse clients, and I'm certainly not going to do that. So I kind of live my life that. Plus my mother, God rest her soul, my father, God rest his soul, would go, you live your life as if, the world is watching. And that was before social media.
Right.
Now it's like, do you understand? Like, it's like between you and me, and you're on national TV, it's just between the two of us and the 14 million people that are watching you. That's why years ago at the chamber, they'd go, Richard Gerson, God rest his soul, would go, Judy, come on my radio station. I go, have we met? I can't do live TV. I can't do live radio. I'm just not sure what's coming out of my mouth. He's like, okay.
Fair point.
Yeah.
I want to
you very
thank you
much. It
guys
was
for
very
Yeah,
participating.
I've got a
for
hard stop too, Colleen. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you very
Yeah,
much.
it was
very,
great.
very
Thank you
informative.
both so much.
Small and intimate, but
Yeah, thank you
good.
for your tenacity. And to anybody who may take the opportunity to watch this, if anyone has further
Absolutely.
questions or, Bonnie and I love board service, love boards, love nonprofits, and love to see more people on them. We in Hunterdon County tend to have a few people doing a lot of things, and we'd like to see that, we like to encourage people to get engaged. So we're here for you. So
spread it out.
thank
sure.
you.
I sent you an email last week. I'm not sure you got it. Could you call me?